button. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. We are going to review WAC 1110, 148, 1440, which is the requirements for home and property. 1430, which is reporting requirements when there's a change in the home environment or the home itself. And 1445, which is safety around bodies of water. Ooh, Are we missing Eva? So right now, Alicia, if you could shut down your slide deck. I will share. Let's see, share a document. I'll share the screen here, and then I'll take notes, Felix. Can you all see the document here, 1440?
Yes, Marge, do you mind making it just a little bigger, zooming in?
I sure will. Let's see. Oh, is that too big? How's that?
I don't believe it's changing anything. There we go. Perfect.
Okay. All right. So Felix, you kick us
Yes.
off.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So the purpose of reviewing the WAC this morning is a couple months ago, we sent out feedback, or we asked for feedback on WACs, and we received a set of WACs that was very clear, and the NRM team can begin to revise for this group to later review that language. However, there's a handful of WAC where language was vague, or maybe there was contradicting comments. And what better way to clarify these discussion points other than opening it up and talking with us all today. So discussion is highly encouraged. Actually, it's the only way we're going to be able to move forward, is if discussion is if we're talking about these WACs. So we're going to go ahead and start with 1440 today, which are what are the requirements for my home and property. And I want to talk a little bit about the intent of this WAC before we open up for discussion. So the intent of this WAC is for there to be living space standards that are flexible, so that there's no bias between rural homes and urban homes. So what this lays down is we're talking about safety, and we're talking about basic needs. So we will take this line by line. If we feel like there is a line that doesn't need discussion, please speak up if you do want to highlight a thought, a concern. Also, if there's anything in this that's not regarding or if there is thoughts that aren't reflected in this WAC that you also want to bring up that should be included, please again speak up. So again, we are looking at WAC 1440. What are the requirements for my home and property? And the first line just states, pursuant to RCW, your home must be located at the particular fixed location stated on your license. So with number one, we don't really have flexibility with this because it is a RCW, a state RCW, but I wanted to reach out to the group and discuss if this makes sense to the group. Do we understand why we have to have a fixed location? All right, Tiffany, thank you for responding yes. Makes sense for Billy. All right, so we'll move on to line number two. Your home must have an adequate indoor or outdoor space, ventilation, toilet, bathing facilities, light, heat to ensure the health and comfort of all members of the household. Were there any questions from the group for line number two?
So just to let you fill you on a conversation that we had on Tuesday evening, we had a lot of we chatted about outdoor space, and what that means. And if you have a caregiver who's in the city, in an apartment, who may not have access, to a yard. So what does that outdoor space look like? And why is it there in the WAC? What does that have to do with child safety or being able to care for a child? So that was a conversation that we had on Tuesday evening, just to let you all know.
All right, I will kind of rephrase the thought that's being put out as we go line by line. I will kind of just summarize 1, 2, and 3 through A and B. What we're talking about here are the basic essentials. So maybe the better question is, are there any questions about the assessment of basic essentials in a home? Or is that intent pretty clear?
It seems clear to me.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Welcome back.
So clarification on number 3. We were going through a renovation, so our refrigerator couldn't be in our kitchen. So are we requiring that the refrigerator be in the kitchen, or the stove be in the kitchen, or that these things be in a kitchen? Because that's how it's written. So it doesn't allow for any variation from that. Not that we should verify, like, not so that we plan that everyone's renovating, but like, your fridge leaks and then now you have to replace the floor and then you have issues. So if this is going to be the standard, I totally understand that. But if there's times where you're set up where it's not going to be a perfect, complete kitchen. And going back to number 2, I think your home must have adequate indoor space and access to adequate outdoor space. Would solve the issue of not having a backyard.
Great suggestions. We will type those out. And
So, Whitney, can you say that again?
Sure. So your home must have adequate indoor space and access to adequate outdoor space.
Okay. So I have a question. When you were going through a remodel, or I had a home once that had a big flood. How was that managed with this WAC?
We asked permission from the licensor to allow it to happen. And so we did. I mean, we got extra permission. So I guess my question is, why would all these things have to be in a kitchen? Shouldn't it be in the home?
thank you, Winnie. I left out a piece. Anything that you're seeing in purple is a federal standard. So while there are some flexibility with that language, we do also want to acknowledge that we want anything that's in purple to really stand out within our WAC. Because if we were to be audited, we do want to make sure that it's easy for that federal audit to identify those federal standards. However, we'll do some cross-reference to see if indeed we know that A and D have to be in the home. We'll double check to see if it needs to be in the kitchen.
Okay.
Any other thoughts, concerns of how basic essentials reads in this WAC? All right, we'll move on to the second section of this WAC. And really what we're talking about is the condition of the home. and those structures on the property. So here we have things that discuss such as furnishing areas. We have that it must be free of pests, rodents, flies, roaches, fleas, and other insects. We address toxic material and how they're stored, that they need to be out of the reach of children. And we also address hazards on the property. Whitney.
What does it mean by out of reach? Because I found that this is licensor roulette on what that means to them. And I think to have it clearer would be better for those of us who've had issues with that.
Are there any other thoughts from other caregivers or CPA reps that are present? Do we want more concrete language, or do we want to have language that's more flexible? What's the group think about that?
I know when we were licensed, we were told there were kind of two different categories of toxic materials, and some of them had to be kept out of reach and some of them had to be locked up. And it was basically based on the warning label on the container. Like if it could kill you, it had to be locked up. And if it was just keep out of reach of children, then it had to be kept out of reach. But if that's the rule, I think maybe we could clarify that in the WAC a little better.
Perfect. Any other experiences from other caregivers? How do you store your toxic materials, or how are you being told to?
I think some of the more of like vague open language is helpful in some areas, due to the age range that people are licensed for as well. Because if you're licensed for little kids, out of reach is just on a high shelf, which works great. And then you just kind of have a little bit more flexibility within your license range to, as you get older kids, your licensor should be working with you to make sure that they're inaccessible to kids, which might mean locked up.
But it says out of reach, not inaccessible. So how would we make it out of reach for, say, a 17-year-old who's 6'5"?
And can we
Right.
trust the 17-year-old not to drink the antifreeze?
I think inaccessible might be a better word there instead of out of reach.
I agree. I like that word, but the problem is the inaccessible also comes to the issue of I've had some licensors say it has to be locked, some say it has to be physically out of reach. I've had some say that it needs to be like separated in different areas. And so what I want to avoid is I have my licensor, we get approved today, and then we get a new licensor because I've had 3 in the last year. And the new one comes in and does the random house visit, and now I'm out of compliance because their idea of out of reach is completely different.
I think another thing too to have a little bit of thought or discussion about is, 16-year-old, for example, learning independent living skills, doing their own laundry, learning how to do cleaning, and some 16-year-olds, those kinds of chemicals and toxic things might need to be locked up if there's like self-harm behavior, and others, we want them to be able to be learning those independent living skills.
Great thought, Mary. Something that came to mind as I heard you speak is, do we want to add language here? Maybe based upon the age or developmental stage of the youth or child? Or do we want to keep it more broad, flexible language?
It's always hard when the language is too vague or flexible and broad in the WAC versus more concrete. And there are pros and cons to both. But one of the cons, I can't remember who spoke right before me, but you were talking about having 3 different licensors over the course of a year. really sorry to hear that that's been your experience. And you're being told something different by each one because maybe there's a particular WAC where it's written more vaguely or has more flexibility. And so then that just is ripe for varying kinds of interpretations by different licensors. So that's not really an answer. That's just a thought in this discussion about vague and flexible versus more concrete.
Thank you, Mary.
So I'm curious that those of you who are with a CPA or we have a few state licensors here with us today or representing licensing division. Do you have any thought on how you think we could make this clearer as you are dealing with caregivers? So Christina, are you following the WAC, Felix? The specifics are kept in the DCYF policy instead of WAC. Do foster parents have access to read those written policies to ensure they aren't being jerked around by social workers with different opinions? I believe our policies are part of public. You have access to them. I might be wrong. Does anybody have any?
We have asked for access to them before and have not been given them. Sometimes our state licensor will give us a snapshot or picture of something specific we're asking about, but I'm not aware of where we have full access to all of them.
Okay.
Thank you, Renee. We will take that thought and follow with that.
And I think part of it too is, especially with the internal policies, is there's changes and they change sometimes often and we don't always know about them, or it would be great to have access so we can see what the current ones are.
Well, and just to be transparent, our current policies, because of all the changes with WACAP and with the home study process, they don't reflect currently what's the practice is. They will someday. Alexis says it is public. Okay.
All right. Outside of toxic materials, are there any other topics we're seeing here in the second part of this WAC that are standing out to anybody? Yes, Renee, we will follow up with links to policies.
So number 6 is requiring the foster parents to provide adequate laundering. And I know from previous sessions, we were trying to incorporate potential of chores. Do we want to look at making that more broad rather than you must provide it to something of like laundering must happen? I don't know the wording, but like making it so that that it gets done, but it's not necessarily you are the one providing it. You are ensuring that laundering is done. But I also don't want to open this to like child labor, so.
I don't think you are, Whitney. I guess, my question is the intent is that kids need to have clean clothes, but does number 6 mean that the caregivers are doing the laundry? Or does it imply that there must be adequate laundering within the home, no matter who does?
The striked out line actually makes it so that the equipment is available, but with the strikeout, it's saying you must provide the services. So you must provide laundering and drying equipment or make other arrangements for laundry on a regular basis is how it was written. And then with the striked out line, it's saying you must provide adequate laundering on a regular basis.
Yeah, good point, Marge. We do want to make sure that that's not stricken out. The federal standards say that they either need to have like a washer and dryer on site or have access or make arrangements to
Okay.
the washer and dryer. As Marge types out, are there any other thoughts when we're looking at lines 5 through 9? Anything stand out? All right. Any other thoughts on WAC 1440 before we move on to the next WAC? All right, Marge, we'll scroll down to 1430. So we have WAC 1430 with the original name of what are other reporting requirements. And what we had some suggestions of changing this to changes to home or residence. With the content below, we had the feedback of maybe that was more clear and direct. So we want to, we'll take time to review all this, but we want to make sure to really highlight and I want to talk about the changes that you're required to report to your home. So if we take a look at 2A, B, C, 3A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we see scenarios where you need to report to your licensor. However, here, outside of moving, there are no timelines of when you need to make this report. So I kind of wanted to talk about changes that occur to your home, or maybe your home, the people living in your home. So for example, if you get divorced, married, if people are moving in or out, and when are you reporting this? Are you reporting this immediately? Has anyone had these experiences in their home where people are moving in and out?
None of you have?
I've moved, but I haven't had people move in and out of my house.
Okay.
Yeah, we received from feedback from caregivers saying that there's no timelines established around this in the WAC, and they would like to see timelines, but we didn't receive suggestions of what those timelines should be. Are there any thoughts on that thought?
For the timeline in moving, the department has 30 days from when, is it from when you move to make the changes? So shouldn't we be reporting so that they have time to, I mean, like, so what I ended up doing, reading the law, I thought that I had 30 days from when I moved to notify my licensor, rather than the licensor has 30 days from when I moved to complete the, I don't know, renewal, whatever you would call it. So I created a crunch timeline for them because I didn't understand what the timeline was as written. And so I think we need to require a timeline for when for the parent or foster or the licensee to report when they're doing these things. I know you just asked for a timeline. I'm trying to think of a good one. I don't know. I'll have to think on it.
Yeah, so the moving one actually does have the timeline that is that you do need to let them know before you move or within the 30 days after moving.
Right, but then they have 30 days from when you move in to complete the process. So if I wait till 30 days after, which this allows me to, they have 0 time to meet the requirement on their end. So I don't think it's
That's
fair
correct.
to the department to allow me to wait 30 days when you have 30 days from the same date to do what you need to do.
That's
So I
correct.
think we need to shorten that up.
Okay.
I think for clarification, this is a notification statement here. The licensor requirement to change that was changed, I think, last year. For if you have a placement, it's 30 days. If you don't, it's 90 days now.
Mhm.
And I think some good wording in here would be as soon as possible, because if you have a placement, DCYF licensor, everybody needs to know of your move prior to your move. So as soon as possible would be a good addition, I think, to add to it.
Yeah, I mean, we ask our families to let us know if they are actively in the process of looking at, other places to move to, if they have a timeline in their mind about when they're wanting to move. And then we ask them to let us know as soon as they have a move-in date, so that we know when that 30-day clock starts ticking for us, if they've got a child currently in their home.
Yeah,
you-
same with us as well.
So you guys, with the CPAs, you kind of plan ahead.
Yes.
Absolutely, because we only have, if there's a child placed in their home, we have 30 days from the day that they, their first night. And if we don't, like Whitney was saying, if we don't get notified until day 5 or 15 or 25, that's a tight crunch to try to get the move completed, the move packet.
And that also allows us to have the family start completing the documentations. A lot of it they can do prior to the move,
Right.
making it easier to complete after the move.
Right. And then you guys go in and do the walkthrough, because you're just really relicensing the structure of the home.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So Alexa, and then there's a thumbs up here. Tell me what you mean by or immediately for which part of this WAC?
Oh, so somebody mentioned as soon as possible. So what I meant was we could say as soon as possible, or also consider the word immediately.
Okay.
I think that will create confusion, because I know my situation was unique, but we bought a house and then slowly moved into the house. It was like over a whole month period. So we didn't have like this official date. This is the day we're in. We were living in both houses at one point. And so that's why that time frame kind of clicked, where if we're counting it the first night you sleep in the house, that's going to trigger things differently if you're having the kind of slow move in. Immediately is really difficult when someone is purchasing a house, selling a house, and trying to move an entire family. And so go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. You finish, and then I'll just chime in, like I'll elaborate a little bit more.
I think it needs to be as soon as possible, but I also think there needs to be a grace period. But I think it needs to be taken into consideration. There's a 30-day time frame from the clock that starts. And so how it's written right now doesn't allow any time frame for that 30 days in reality. And it would be great that before we move, we have that date. I think that could be a requirement, absolutely. But how it's written right now is it gives us a full 30 days, which puts everybody under pressure to get it done in one day if we wait.
So if I may elaborate and explain better. So what I meant was, like, as soon as you know that you are planning to move, it's probably like you want to let your state licensor or CPA licensor know for planning, because sometimes, and this is real to help the families, sometimes you move to a house with a swimming pool and you don't know, or by the lake, some situations that might require a little more assessment or safety plan, just physical structure of where you're moving to. It does help to have, like you said, sufficient time, right, for CPA or your state licensor to kind of have a heads up to work with you around, pool cover, whatever, fence. So for that reason, so that's where I was coming from. So, I mean, wordsmithing is, at the end, like not my lane, but so I was just coming from, like, as soon as you know you want to move or you're planning to move and you identify a house, it may not be a bad idea to notify immediately to your licensor or CPA, and, in case there's some special circumstances to the house that you are wanting to move to.
I think for clarification, there's two different things. This WAC is reporting only. It is not the processing and finishing that renewal or the move. Because that would be a policy thing with DCYF, correct, on the timeline part, to get that move renewal or the move done?
That's correct. You're absolutely right. Here we're talking about just starting that notification process, and then the process would then follow outside of the SWAC.
Yeah, to follow up with what Renee said, part of the problem is requesting a continuation within 30 days after moving. Per RCW, the licensor has to be in the home within 30 days. So I think clarifying that or just removing it at all would be helpful. Because like we need to know before the 30-day mark if they don't have kids in their home.
So I think what we need to do here also is just really make sure that we know what the RCW 74, 15, 10, 100 is. And what I'm reading here is the department shall either grant or deny a license within 90 days unless the application is for licensure as a foster family. You didn't. So just a 30-day is that policy? What about if there's like a death of one of the licensees that's on the license, one of the caregivers that's on the license?
I think that should probably be pretty soon, but you also have to give a little bit of grace to the fact that people are grieving and dealing with a million things when, you know, someone has passed away. So I don't know if, 72 hours is an appropriate amount of time. I'm thinking, looking at 3, that there's probably a few things that need to be moved up to under 2 as immediate, like arrest of someone on the premises, someone moving into your home. DCYF needs to do a background check on any adult moving into your home. That should be immediate. Serious physical or mental incapacity that interferes with your ability to care for children should probably be immediate too. And then for the rest of them, maybe 72 hours, 48, 72 hours. I did have a question about 3I. If you adopt a child through DCYF, do you still need to notify your licensor, or do they already know that? Because it never occurred to me I needed to tell DCYF that I adopted a child out of DCYF. But I'm not clear on whether or not that's the case.
I can answer that if it would be helpful. It's helpful if you notify us because we don't always know when an adoption is completed. In licensing, we don't always get that communication from the adoption unit. So it's helpful because it can affect your capacity, or, we may need to come out and do a modification or something like that. So it is really helpful if you can tell us. We're not going to give you a valid if you don't, but it's just helpful.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Janelle. And in the years I did all my work, I never got notification of an adoption. So Alexis said it is in policy, but all things expectations can be made on a case-by-case basis with AA. Alexa, are you talking about adoptions here?
Just in general, I think, can you hear me? Mine.
We
Okay.
can hear you.
Okay. The intent of WACs is to be succinct and not dive into the details. I mean, that's my understanding from our policy and the rules and policy unit. So I just wanted to mention that, and there's always going to be like a case by case exceptions, right? I mean, like somebody mentioned death in the family. If that happens to happen near the move, that might impact the timeline. So I think we all know that there are some circumstances, that unexpected circumstances that come up, and that can be dealt on a case by case approach at that time. So I think we just want to keep in mind that WACs are intended to be like capturing the big picture and not diving into details. I mean, at least that's my understanding from the rules and policy team.
Yeah, so Alexa, you're right. That is how it has been done historically. This the NRM process here, it's up to the stakeholders and the caregivers who are at the table on whether they do want to get more detailed in the WAC.
Right, right.
So it may change. So WACs may look very different than they do now. So we can add more detail to WAC. If that's what the voting members want to do.
Right, and I think that's great. Yeah, listening to, I mean, obviously, yes, we want to hear from stakeholders, so or family, then yeah. Great.
But you're also right, is if the WAC isn't clear enough, or we can take policy that then fleshes out the WAC. But this is our opportunity here to really clarify the intent, and when in clarifying the intent, we may need to get more specific with the WAC through the NRM process.
Right. Yeah.
So Whitney asked, are foster parents and CPAs involved in policy development process? I don't believe they are, Whitney.
All right. So how I view as a caregiver is the WAC is the law, the standard at which I'm doing my license, I'm doing what I need to do. The policy is how the department is interpreting these WACs. And so we definitely need to flesh some of this out. And that's where I'm getting at, like, we can always refer to policy, but that's the department's policy. And if we're not giving input on the policy as foster parents and CPAs, that's the department's interpretation of it and how they're going to see it. So either we need to be part of that policy process if we're going to flesh out like things like what's toxic materials or what's out of reach. Passing the buck back to the department to define that is kind of taking that process out of our hands, which I trust the department to do well, right? But at the same time, I don't know where I'm getting at with there. That's just how I see the policies and procedures. So I appreciate the clarification.
Yeah, and I do kind of want to emphasize that this process, the revising these WACs will change DCYF policy. Of course, there will be negotiations where DCYF is involved down the road. There will be licensing reps who will probably push back or give their perspective. But the idea is for everyone to truly understand the WAC and the reasoning as we go through negotiations in the future. What I would suggest to this group is create the WAC that you want to see, your ideal WAC. This is the beginning of the revision process. It will obviously go through negotiations where there'll be other people at the table discussing the WAC and other concerns. But for now, create your ideal WAC. Don't worry about the restrictions created outside of this group. Worry about what you want to see change and how you want to see it change.
Thank you, Felix. Yeah, this is the process where your voice is heard, and from here, policies aren't going to shift a whole bunch from the WAC. Does anybody else have any comments on 1430?
For number one, I would recommend you must request a continuation of your current license at the new location anytime before moving or within 7 days after moving. I think a week is sufficient, and that would give at least 2 weeks for that 30-day timeline, or more for the 90-day timeline.
Yeah, for that one, we're definitely gonna have to follow up because number one is language directly from RCW 74-15-100. So there are areas where we don't have flexibility because of federal standards or state RCWs, but we will definitely look into seeing if we can change or modify that language.
All right. Anything else we want to add here, Whitney?
For the 3 and 4, if we're looking at timeframes, I think it should be no less than 24 hours. 48 hours or 72 seems more appropriate, considering the other reporting requirements are there. Someone mentioned that in the chat. So to me, immediate is too broad. Immediate to me would be I'm literally watching someone get arrested and needing to call my licensor at the same time. Or, you know, my husband dies and not calling my licensor because it's immediate.
And that kind of lines up with other reporting responsibilities. Is it 48, 72, 24, 48 hours for reporting? What is the reporting requirements for an incident in the home now? No?
48 hours.
Is it 48 hours? Okay. Anything else on this WAC?
It seems a little bit duplicative because we've got one that says, you know, which we've talked about a lot, is moving. But then 2 is you must notify them immediately if your address changes, which would happen presumably, I don't know, maybe you have a mailing address. And then, but 2C, notify immediately if you have any changes to your original licensing application. I'm not sure what exactly that means. And how that's different than everything else that's listed out in C, or you relocate your home, which again is covered, I think, under 1. So I'm not sure. 2C is a little bit confusing there.
Well, and if you change your address, isn't that covered under 1? Is it, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I
how
mean, the only way it wouldn't be would be if your mailing address changes, like you have a PO box or
I got
something.
you. Mhm.
So maybe we just need to say your mailing address changes as opposed to
Or is it referring to
actually
email
moving
address?
homes.
Or is it actually, I'm sorry, what?
Email address? Like, I think it's getting at contact information.
So maybe say contact information?
Yeah, I mean, because that would cover all of it.
Do you want that immediately? Say an email address changed. Is that something that you want to report within 48 hours?
I would say yes, because if there is a placement in that home, or yeah, because if there's a placement, they're going to need to know immediately.
Okay. So is this group saying 48 hours would be an immediate response, or 24 hours, or do you, are we landing anywhere with that?
To me, immediate would be 24, but I'm just thinking if you're in crisis, 24 is a very short turnaround. So you're in the hospital, someone's passing away, and you're having to deal with that within 24 hours. Say that's in the middle of the night, trying to get that info, trying to get your life together in order to email a licensor is pretty difficult. But I do want it to be like, I don't want it to be forgotten, and I feel like 40 hours is a long time. Like if I change all of my contact information and no one can get a hold of me for 48 hours, that's a long time that the state may not know where my kid is.
I think some of these are like, they don't have to be immediate. Like there's not an urgency to them. Some of them are.
Okay.
I don't know if you even want to separate them down into the two or put as soon as reasonably possible.
How to spell immediate? So separate them out into immediate or as soon as possible, or we got a 24-hour and then a 72-hour. So kind of separate this WAC out with different reporting time frames.
And I'm sorry, I didn't see who was speaking. Was it Renee?
Yes.
Renee, are there, you mentioned there's some on there that don't have to be immediate or within 24 hours. Do you mind pointing out the ones
Well,
that
like
you think?
the arrest or somebody's having a mental crisis, something that would put a child in danger if there was a child in the home. Like people in your home, we ask our families to let us know ahead of time, but they also, per the state, have 30 days to do that background check if they are in there. So there's different criteria for different ones.
So is it fair to say immediate would be tied to child safety, Renee?
I would think so.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think a change in employment would constitute me contacting a licensor within 24 hours.
Yeah, right. And that's kind of where Tuesday, where, in our conversation where it kind of landed is, okay, what about this WAC is tied to child safety? And then just kind of, those rising to the top as far as when those reporting requirements would be. So, both of our groups this week are kind of landing in the same spot with, updating and changing this WAC. Anything else? Felix, are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay.
So our last WAC to review for today is 1455. How must I keep children safe around bodies of water? And there's two bodies of influence here that I really want to talk about before we get into the language. Is one, we have our federal standards, and those are vague, and those can be wordsmith, and we just want to make sure that that thought is reflected. And I'm going to put that wording in the chat so you have that to reflect. But I also want to introduce the thought that, or give background on this, that this WAC once upon a time was very short. I think it was around 2013 where this WAC changed and expanded. And the result of that was because of a fatality review. And this fatality review led to a lawsuit, and there was changes that came from a work group, and this work group was established to do three things: to ensure that children were properly supervised around pools or bodies of water. There was the decision made by DCYF to require and to lock up or restrict bodies of water. And then the third one is that work group had to add language around requirements of life-saving devices and U.S. Coast Guard approved personnel floating devices. So with that all being said, you have that work group from that fatality review, and then our federal standards compiled here. And I know we have a lot of unhappy foster parents being told to do certain things. And I really want to open up for discussion. What is your thoughts around keeping children safe around water before we start looking into WACs? Like what are those things that we really want to emphasize when we look at the spirit of this WAC?
I mean, for one thing, I think you really have to bear in mind age. Age is huge, whether you're talking about a toddler or a teenager. A high schooler might be able to go swimming on their own without adult supervision if they know how to swim and they're a good swimmer. But obviously, a toddler or a 5-year-old needs constant supervision and maybe a flotation device. And it all depends on the age of the child and their swimming ability. And I don't see a lot of understanding of that in this WAC. It seems like it's kind of treating any child under the age of 18 as the same. And I don't think that's developmentally appropriate.
I understand this WAC is coming from risk mitigation in terms of we are stopping the death, stopping the issues with it, but it doesn't allow for independence and skill building because it's written right now to not allow a child not to wear a safety device. So swim lessons technically are violating this. If they want to learn how to swim, even if you're in it within 3 feet and can grab them, this prohibits that. And it doesn't allow technically for your foster child to go swimming at a pool party without you present. I know there's ways to get around that, but if you're reading it as written, it's very, very restrictive. And I understand why from the death aspect and the risk aspect, but we need to be teaching our kids, whatever age they are, skills. And it's often difficult to do that when it's restrictive.
Thank you, Whitney.
Especially living here in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, there's water everywhere. I remember with when my kids were little, it was part of, you know, the pediatrician checkup. It's like, got to get your kids swimming lessons as a safe, you know, so they know how to swim. And to kind of piggyback on what Felix says about the historical context of this WAC, the deaths that occurred with this WAC were in rivers, so you know, bodies of water with currents that even a really good swimmer would have a really hard time managing. So you know, you've got a pool, you've got different bodies of water, but they also have different risk factors with them. So just putting that out for you guys to think about and for discussion.
Tagging along to this focuses on pools and static bodies. There is nothing in here really to do with rivers. And I don't know how you would incorporate that because I mean, we can't control we can't put a lock around it, right? A fence. And I don't know if we want to require foster parents to do something different when you're around a different kind of body of water.
Yeah, I know from the very first week, one of the definitions that we added to this WAC was defining what are bodies of waters. I don't have that definition right in front of me, but I believe it landed on including pools, rivers, lakes, ocean.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should split it out and have a set of regulations for a swimming pool, a hot tub, and a set of regulations for a river, a lake, the ocean, you know, those kinds of fast moving bodies of water that are a lot more dangerous without a higher level of supervision and safety. I think that's good, for the locking piece. Like you can put a fence and a gate around a swimming pool, but you can't if you have a creek in your backyard. That's going to require a different safety plan. And I think also, you know, maybe you need to wear a life vest if you're swimming in a river or you're kayaking on a river or whatever, but your 10-year-old probably doesn't need to wear a life vest if she's a good swimmer and she's at a friend's pool party and there are adults around supervising, even if there's not a lifeguard.
Yep. Okay. So split up the WAC.
I think we need to make room for exemptions because the example of the 10-year-old who's a swimmer, putting a life vest on her is going to peg her as a foster kid. And
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want my kids to be safe, but I also want them to live a childhood. And so are we going to have can we put in here that, you know, if we're swimming, they don't have to wear the device if we're within a certain distance or if certain things are happening. I don't have the words for this, so I wish I had examples, but I really think we need to allow for exploratory play, I guess. I don't know what to call it.
Well, and
Yeah,
we
my,
talked
my
about
daughter's
this-
like, I wouldn't go to a pool party if I had to wear a life jacket. Like, how embarrassing.
and we chatted about this Tuesdays, like we want all of our kids to have normal childhood experiences while they're in care, and then putting a bright orange life jacket on them, like you said, is, you know, is that providing that for them? Another conversation we had on Tuesday night was about, um, where's the lifeguard?
It is on AB 3AB.
Three,
Sorry, 3B. Oh no, that's Coast Guard approved. I think it's further down a little bit.
No, it is 3B.
No, it's
If
there.
swim, they have to wear a life jacket if swimming outside the supervision of a lifeguard.
there you go. So is
And I'll
it
be honest, I rarely go somewhere with a lifeguard.
exactly? So
Well, can it match then the wording? Because 5 says supervising adult that has CPR or a lifeguard.
exactly. So the two kind of contradict each other. 3B and then number 5. So we have an adult here with first aid CPR or a lifeguard, but then here we have, you know, supervision of a lifeguard in 3B. So that was also fleshed out on Tuesday. Yeah. Alicia, do you want to unmute? I mean, you please chime in just because you're taking notes. You have a lot of experience here. You want
Yeah,
to?
hi you guys. So the language says that an adult has to be CPR and first aid certified, but it doesn't mention anything about them needing to know how to swim, right? And so it's kind of one of those things where I feel like it almost needs to have both sets of language in it. If there's not like a certified lifeguard, you need whomever the adult is needs to definitely be certified, but they also need to know how to swim, right? Because CPR and first aid don't do us any good if you can't get to the child who's drowning in the middle of a pool or out in a body of water. So maybe looking at adding that language.
Thank you. How do others feel about that?
As a former lifeguard, I mean, I know that not all adults know life-saving techniques, even though they might be good swimmers. I don't know. I'm just trying to think through that and how specific we want to make it, that because it's not just a matter of a foster parent who is there in the water with a child, but again, like if a child is at a friend's, if there's a swimming pool in a friend's family's backyard, and adults from, you know, other adults who might be present, that you as a foster parent might not be present on that occasion when the child is swimming in a place away from you.
Mhm.
I think the hard thing is with this, there's so many variables as to types of water, and even if a foster parent can swim or not would depend on the type of water. And even you never know for these kids that are coming into care how well they can swim or not.
I think if we're going to require kids to wear the flotation devices, I could see us requiring it if they were not under the supervision of someone with a lifeguard or someone with the first aid and CPR and is able to swim. But as someone who's not a strong swimmer, whether I can swim or not, I'm still going to try to get that kid. So I'm just struggling with this because I'm thinking about my childhood. I went all the time without a parent or lifeguard or anyone. I went swimming all the time. Was it right? I don't know. I survived. Does that matter? Not really. But I'm just thinking we need to give opportunities for normal childhood experiences. And so maybe we move 3B to under 3 or 5B, or make it 5A and say something like, if not supervised, they're required to wear it. And we make that a condition of them going anywhere that's not supervised. Because right now, technically, we'd be in violation of them swimming anywhere without supervision, right? Or am I reading that too strictly?
So I'm here taking notes, Whitney. Can you go back and restate that? So what you're saying is add an A under 5?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is carve out space for them to be able to not wear the life vest or whatever flotation device, or allow them so that if they're supervised, they don't have to wear it. Or if they're not supervised, they have to wear it.
Okay.
Because
what you're saying is language, when to wear it and when not to wear it?
Both, but also carve out a kid. This doesn't allow for children to swim unsupervised. Now, if we want to make it so they can't swim unsupervised, I totally understand that. But I think there are, based on age and based off a skill level in terms of swimming, kids could swim unsupervised, and this doesn't allow for that. So they went to their friend's house and their friends were swimming, they're going to have to ask that the parent come out and watch them in order for us to meet these requirements, or they're going to have to wear a life vest.
Does anybody have thoughts on that?
I think supervision is still important. I mean, a child could still drown, you know, even if they're wearing a life vest. So yeah, that's where it gets hard. I know like one question my family's come up with is like, what is a designated swimming area? And I think that's important too, especially when it comes to like wearing, if you look at the WAC, it's, you know, you have to be in a designated swimming area or you have to wear a life vest if you're under age 13. So maybe giving examples or a definition of what a designated swimming area is, that might help inform parents if a child needs to wear a life vest or not.
Oh. Any other thoughts? So one conversation we had on Tuesday is this WAC includes number 5, the very last sentence, supervision of adult or birth parent at all times. Anybody have any thoughts about that language within this WAC on number 5?
Is birth parent called out specifically because the birth parent might not be an adult? I'm not sure. I'm not sure why we're saying adult or birth parent.
Yeah.
Unless we are saying the birth parent might be 16.
So maybe language in here, if the birth parent is under the age of what? 21? Would there be a specific age?
Why would the birth parent need to be specified at all?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think this is the only, I mean, I'm not intimately familiar with all the WACs, but I think this is the only one that I really recall having a birth parent part of a WAC. Anybody else? Felix, do you have anything? To add?
I think we also talked on Tuesday about waterfront properties and barriers. We didn't go too deep into the conversation, but they brought up great points, and I wanted to ask the CPA reps, or caregivers here, thoughts of waterfront properties and maybe like some basic concepts that come to mind, because it's right there, it's right in front of you, and that they could really have access at any time. Thoughts of keeping children safe around waterfront properties. What are some thoughts that come to mind?
I know our CPA has a few homes on different bodies of water throughout the state, and it's really a case by case plan of what we do with the home and what needs to be required. We have a home that's on the bay, and we had them put a fence up around because it was a situation that could be done, and how their home layout was with access to the back to get to the bay. So it looks completely different than a home that's on a lake or that has a creek running through it. So that's really a specific case by case, but we ensure that there's a barrier that's locked, that and do a case plan or a supervision plan case by case on what the house looks like, depending and following the WACs.
Thank you, Sydney. Any other thoughts from any other CPAs? Or caregivers?
I don't think we should require it in law, but I really think it would be helpful if a home with a pool or a home with, a waterfront property had some type of training or resource for the kids to learn to swim, that it was kind of worked into that. I don't know if that's a thing. I know it's like, I mean, we can't even get CPR classes. So this is, a pipe dream, but like, it's a life skill that every kid needs, absolutely. But for these homes that have these features, I think it would definitely be helpful for those kids. Another step for protection.
Well, good suggestion. So I'm going to ask our state reps here, which I think it's Alexa and Janelle, when we get applications where our home's on the water, or what do you look for as far as child safety with those specific applications?
I think, what Sydney just mentioned, a lot of times it's really case by case. I mean, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our intent is always to support for approval versus not approving something. So with that in mind, we try to problem solve together and always, approach with a case by case.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of this depends on the age that you're licensed for.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I used to be a 911 dispatcher, and we had a lot of drownings. And it's so easy for a baby or younger kids to drown in even a bucket of water. So there is a high liability. A lot of these I would do just even if I wasn't a licensed family, just for liability and safety reasons. Because like the locks, you could have a neighbor kid or somebody come in to your home, or the kids could get in there when you're in bed at night, or so it's just a secondary protection for them.
Well, safety for all kids come to the home, or who may have access.
Just another thought, we do get a lot of homes that have decorative water features, so ponds, fountains, various things like that. And it is challenging because the WAC doesn't really clearly address those things. And so again, that becomes a little bit of that licensor roulette that we talked about earlier of what a licensor is going to feel comfortable with, what they're going to require from the family. I mean, it does depend too on, as what people have said, ages of the child or what the actual water feature is. But I think that's a challenging thing to navigate sometimes as a licensor, because they all are so different. But having some parameters might be helpful. I don't know if that's something that's been considered for this WAP.
Okay. When Janelle, I mean, when I was doing the work, we would have them fence off even a decorative pond. Is that what licensing the division's doing right now?
I mean,
There's
oh,
been
go ahead,
some
Jenna.
regulatory drift.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I think again, it all depends on like the size of it, the depth of it. We wouldn't just say, put a fence around it. I mean, really, it's really case by case. And that's why we do a lot of staffings, and really that's helpful to everybody, CPAs, our families, whether, it's a state home or CPA home.
Yep, I remember doing lots of staffings around bodies of water.
We also have to keep in mind the barrier to licensing or just trying to recruit foster parents if we make this too strict. I mean, when we were looking at houses, there was a house that had like a semi-annual pond on it, and it was like a 10-acre property. And I remember sitting there being like, how are we going to fence this? How are we going to meet that requirement? So we actually just completely had the house off the list. But when we're looking at getting new foster parents, say they have a waterfront property or a pool, these are actual barriers to getting licensing that, yes, we can work around. Yes, we can staff them internally. We can make things work. But if someone's coming into this kind of wishy-washy, I don't really know, and then comes with this, well, your whole pool needs to be barrierized, it's difficult. So I think keeping it vague and keeping it kind of the way we have it is great. We also need to look at the risk aspect. I'm coming from a CPS background. I've had children pass away in bathtubs, in sub pumps, when they fell in. I mean, this can happen anywhere. So I understand the risk. I don't mean to sound jaded, but we also have to find the balance of, okay, we can put these certain things in place, but we also have to allow the kids to be kids.
And I think the age you're being licensed for matters. I think a 2-foot deep little pond in your backyard is a danger to a 2-year-old, but not to a 13-year-old. And maybe that needs to be fleshed out a little better in the WAC.
Not only age fleshed out, but also when it would be acceptable to not wear those flotation devices. Because I want my kids to learn to swim without a flotation device. And how with 3B and 5 right now, that wouldn't be possible with how it's written.
All right.
I think if you're considering age, you should also include developmental level.
Who are you, iPhone 2.0?
Oh, it's Nora. Sorry, my computer died, so I'm on my phone.
It's like all of a sudden I'm like, I don't recognize you.
Sorry about that. I forgot it. Should like that.
Okay, no. Anything else? Felix? Do you have any?
I don't have any other discussion points on this one.
Okay, thank you. So we have 10 minutes left here. Do you guys have any other comments on the 3 WACs?
Well, we very much appreciate the conversation today. Marge, is there anything else to review today, or are we all done?
I think we're done. The one individual who hasn't been here before, if you want to stay on, we can just kind of quickly I want to talk to you about how reps are picked. I think everybody else here is very familiar with that process. And then we can let y'all go. Thank you very, very much. And hopefully, well, next week we're taking it off. Happy 4th of July to you all. And we'll see you, believe it or not, I can hardly believe it, but we'll see you the second weekend of July. Like, where did the year go? Or where's the year going?
Thank you, guys. We appreciate this.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Libby. Hi, Mary.
Hi, I'm the person who this was my first time.
Oh, but you're standing in, you're for somebody else from Amara?
No, I just independently decided I wanted to sit in on it. I couldn't make the other ones.
Okay, okay. And to let you know, last week's is on our website. If you want to,
Okay,
if you want to listen to that recording.
great.
And then I will get, not last week, the week before, and then I'll get last week and this one on our website, hopefully by the end of next week. There's always a delay
Yeah.
in there. So being from Amara, I just wanted to, are you familiar with the negotiation process and how we pick our reps for the negotiation?
I'm not personally, no.
Okay. Okay.
My supervisor is Trisha Lambie. She's the director of resource care at Amara, so she probably has some familiarity with that process, but I don't myself.
Okay, and then what is your role at Amara?
I'm the foster care placement manager.
Oh, you are? Okay, okay. And then so you do placement, and then what about licensing?
So I've done licensing. I am Amara has shifted over the 5.5 years that I've been with Amara, like who does what pieces of work. So I used to do licensing and placement. We separated out our licensing and home study work from our work with families who are licensed and placed. And so I have been, prior my title was supervisor, one of the placement supervisors. Now my title is foster care placement manager. However, our licensing staff is fairly new, so I'm like helping and training our current licensing staff. So I have a lot of experience with licensing. I had been at Lutheran Community Services prior to coming to Amara and did all, licensing of my own caseload of families.
Okay, okay. So I think because we're bumping up against time here and it's complicated.
Yeah.
Sydney, are you sitting in for somebody from CFSC?
Yes.
Okay.
CFSS. Yeah.
Community.
Yeah. It's
normally
it's Shelly. She just was in meetings today, so she asked me to join. She just wants a licensor present at each one of these so that we can keep up to date and make sure we can chime in if need be. Yeah.
Okay. So then
I'm sorry for interrupting. Marge, do you want to stop the recording?
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, we don't need this on the website, do we?